Welcome to Hockey Wiz Talks podcast. Today I'll be talking about players to hold or drop in fantasy hockey. In this podcast, I talk about whether certain players should be held or dropped in fantasy hockey. Players to hold in fantasy hockey. Elias Pettersson. Elias Pettersson has not lived up to expectations thus far, but that doesn't mean you should drop him right now. It would be a huge mistake for owners to drop Pettersson because he is capable of being a top-flight fantasy player when he is hot. Taylor Hall. Taylor Hall has struggled so far this season with the Boston Bruins because they haven't found the right center to mesh with him. However, I think it's too early to start dropping a player like Taylor Hall because it would be very tough to find a player of his caliber on the waiver wire. Blake Wheeler. Blake Wheeler had a very slow start to the season this year, only recording 5 points so far this year. But that doesn't mean you should panic and drop Wheeler because he has proved to be a very consistent 60-point scorer in his career. Thomas Chabot. Thomas Chabot has not had a good start to the season, but owners should not panic about his lack of production because the Senators don't really have anyone that can overtake his spot on the roster, so his production will eventually come. Ivan Provorov. Ivan Provorov is having a subpar start to the season, but there is no reason to start thinking about dropping him because he has been contributing in other categories such as shots on goal and blocks. Thatcher Demko. Thatcher Demko and the Vancouver Canucks have had a rough start to the season, but I wouldn't drop him because the Canucks should have a strong second half, and Demko would have to play a big part in that. And now a word from our sponsor. Check out my scouting blog at hockeywiz777scouting.com. Listen to my scouting blog podcast on anchor.fm/hockeywiz777scouting. Players to drop in fantasy hockey. Christian Dvorak. Christian Dvorak is not worth owning in fantasy hockey leagues unless the league counts face-off wins, because his production is not good enough to offset his terrible plus-minus. Dominik Kubalk. Dominik Kubalk is struggling to score this year, and like the rest of the Chicago Blackhawks, his plus-minus is awful. He should be dropped because he is easily replaceable. Josh Anderson. Josh Anderson is a solid player to have in a league that counts shots on goal and hits, but due to his terrible plus-minus, it kind of cancels out his production, which is why he should be dropped. Ty Smith. Ty Smith is going through a rough patch during his sophomore season in the NHL and has even been a healthy scratch at times. He is a player you can drop because there are better options available on the waiver wire. Jeff Petrie. Jeff Petrie, along with many other Montreal Canadiens, is having a rough season thus far. Montreal is in tank mode, so he should be dropped if you are in a standard league. Philip Grubauer. Philip Grubauer and the Seattle Kraken have not had a great inaugural season, and I don't see them getting any better this year. If you are in a non-keeper league, Grubauer should be dropped because he would hurt your team more than he would help it. Check out my hockey blog at hockeywiztalkshockey.blogspot.com. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram at hockeywiz777. How to decide what players to drop or hold. You want to hold players who have a proven track record. You also want to hold players who are known to have a good second half. You want to drop players on bad teams with bad production. And you also want to drop players having sophomore slumps. In my next podcast, I'll be talking about major injuries and navigating through them in fantasy hockey.